Now, Zimbabweans voted in parliamentary and municipal by-elections this past weekend. Nelson Chamisa, who's seen as the most formidable challenger to the incumbent President Mnangagwa, contested under Citizens Coalition for Change. For more on the insights on the vote, we are joined now by Wits University's Gideon Chitanga. Gideon, good evening and good to have you once again tonight. I mean, we did talk about this last week and a sense of there could possibly be low voter turnout. What do you think is behind the low voter turnout in many constituencies this time around?
Thank you for having me. As I said last week, it's a common trend that by-elections generate relatively lesser political excitement compared to the proper general elections. However, the low voter turnout would be a bit surprising in consideration of the turnout at the rallies that we witnessed for both for ZANU-PF and the Triple C. So the expectation was that there was going to be at least relatively higher voter turnout compared to previous by-elections. Like I indicated previously, and I still hold this point, a lot of young people in Zimbabwe, but also in general, enjoy the excitement of what I would call the political vibe. They would come out to rallies. But in the case of Zimbabwe, some are not registered, some are not really interested in voting itself, and therefore the numbers that you see in rallies do not translate to direct votes. The other thing is that I think Zimbabwe is still facing severe socioeconomic conditions, and a lot of young people are concerned with issues of livelihoods. So if it's not going to a rally where they would get food and alcohol and just enjoy, especially the artists who came there, they would rather be at home or chasing whatever means of survival they have to engage in to eke out a living. It might also indicate less and less confidence in the voter system and dissatisfaction, and exhaustion, political exhaustion, and skepticism emanating from trends of violence, intimidation, allegations which have been raised by the opposition that the vote was likely to be fraudulent or to be subverted by the ruling party. These things, while they apply to a certain extent, they also tend to exhaust the voters who are very much focused on change. The moment they feel that the opportunities to change the system, to change the government, to bring in a different agency is constrained, then they do not actually feel compelled to go out to vote. It's like a feeling grows that their vote does not mean anything. So I think a combination of these factors explain why a lot of people, mostly young people, then did not vote, although they followed their candidates and went out for rallies.
To what extent does the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission take blame here in how they administer elections?
I think to some extent, the Zimbabwe Election Commission takes a certain level of blame. The dissatisfaction with how ZEC handles elections is a historical problem in Zimbabwe. And already as Zimbabwe went into these elections, there were various allegations related to bodged up voter registration, mixed up registration of voters, suggestions related to gerrymandering, the boundaries which are of constituencies which were not clear. In some cases, some people were registered in administrative problem which were brought out with examples of certain residential addresses having huge numbers of registered voters, multiple registered voters, some people registering in different areas, dirty voters, and so on. So I think the lack of professionalism at ZEC, the problem with transparency in respect of addressing issues that emanate from all opposition parties, the lack of accountability and transparency at ZEC is a problem that also causes this kind of dissatisfaction that tends to erode the freedom of expression in the sense of Zimbabwean citizens going out to vote, to exercise their right to choose their preferred leaders.
If this by-election this past Saturday is a litmus test or a dress rehearsal for next year's election, what are we learning from it, and what could we expect then next year?
To an extent, you are right. It is a litmus test. I think the major point for me is that at institutional level and in terms of running the electoral process, it means that political parties need to do more work with and around the Zimbabwe Election Commission to ensure that the next election are not going to be disputed. With respect to the performance of the political parties, I mentioned last week again that, and this is linked to voter apathy, ZANU-PF must be celebrating. They gained 2 parliamentary constituencies, raising the number of their members of parliament. In other words, they now will enjoy a higher number of legislative influence and power than they had, although they already had an outright 2/3 majority. The opposition combined, but particularly the CCC, because remember these elections were partly necessitated because of the divisions in the opposition camp. So what they got was simply what they had, and from what they had, they lost these 2 urban constituencies. So if you consider the loss of the 2 urban constituencies, if you consider that ZANU-PF also demonstrated that it's gaining in terms of the numbers that are coming out, it's gaining in the urban areas, I think the opposition has a lot of work to do going into the 2023 elections. If ZANU-PF was testing its strategy, I think they are relatively happy that they are dominating in the raw areas. If you look at the raw constituencies, you will see that they were beating the CCC and the MDCT by up to 10,000 voters or around that figure. If you look at urban areas, a lot of urban areas were scoring for the CCC around 5,000, 4,000, and ZANU-PF would still manage to gain between 1,000 to 2,500. So in a national election, ZANU-PF will dominate the raw areas, still eat into the strongholds of the opposition. If you factor in voter apathy, I think they have a clear strategy to win the next election. But it is up to the opposition working together or exclusively as different parties to deal with the issue of voter apathy and to address all issues that are affecting citizens and restraining them from going out to vote, so that they increase the threshold of voters and they increase the number of people who will go out to directly vote. This is the best that can be the game changer for them. Under the circumstances, I think if work had not begun for the opposition, then they must be looking at themselves and saying their work begins now.
Gideon, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. Gideon Chitanga there with us tonight. He is from Wits University.